Part 1. The message came through the deep space relay at 0317 Earth Standard Time. It blinked onto every official screen across the Sol system, on Luna Base, Mars Colony Theta, the orbital shipyards near Jupiter, and even the old listening posts on Pluto's frozen edge. The words were calm, precise, and cold as vacuum. You are in violation of Article 7 of the Treaty of Celestial Harmony. Cease all interstellar construction. Surrender your fleet. Accept Galactic Concord oversight within 7 solar days. Failure to comply will be met with enforcement. No signature, no face. Just the silver seal of the Galactic Concord, a ring of stars wrapped around a single unblinking eye. On Luna Base Gamma, Commander Paul Hayes stood in the dim glow of the comms room, arms crossed, jaw tight. He had seen alien transmissions before, but never one like this. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a warning. It was a sentence. Beside him, diplomat Lisa Monroe tapped her fingers against the console. She was young for her role, only 32, but sharp-eyed and steady. "They're serious," she said quietly. "This isn't posturing. They've already voted." Paul didn't answer right away. He stared at the message as if it might change. Outside the viewport, Earth hung in the blackness, blue, white, and alive. Beautiful, fragile, and now, apparently, guilty. Back on Earth, the United Earth Defense Council met in a sealed chamber beneath Geneva. The room was old, built during the last century's climate wars, but reinforced with new alloys and shielded against every kind of surveillance. 12 men and women sat around the table, faces lit by soft screens. Some wore uniforms. Others wore suits. All looked tired. President Daniel Ruiz sat at the head. He was 58 with close-cropped gray hair and hands that still bore the calluses of his days as a naval engineer. He'd never wanted to be president. He'd wanted to fix engines, not nations. But here he was. "They call us reckless," said General Elena Ford, her voice rough. "They say we're building warships disguised as freighters, that we're mining asteroids without permits, that we're destabilizing the sector." She snorted. "We've barely left our own backyard. But we did leave it," Ruiz said. "We built the Titan shipyards. We sent probes past Proxima. We traded with the Varel outposts. We didn't ask permission. Maybe that's the crime." A silence settled over the room. Everyone knew the truth. Humanity had spent 2 centuries crawling back from the brink of self-destruction. Wars, plagues, climate collapse, they'd survived it all. And in the last 50 years, they'd finally reached the stars. Not with conquest, but with curiosity. With hope. Now the galaxy was telling them to sit down and be quiet. On Mars Colony Theta, engineer Nate Brooks watched the message replay on a cracked tablet in the mess hall. Around him, colonists ate in silence. Some looked scared, others angry. A kid, couldn't have been more than 16, slammed his tray down and said, "They don't even know us." Nate didn't answer. He just thought about the solar array he'd spent 3 weeks repairing. About the water recyclers that kept 2,000 people alive in a desert of rust and dust. Earth wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and no one from a council light years away was going to take that away without a fight. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Chicago, Maya Ruiz scrolled through news feeds on her wall screen. She wasn't supposed to know her brother was president. Officially, she was just another civilian pilot with a Class 4 deep-range license. But she knew. And she knew what this message meant. She picked up her comm unit and dialed a number she hadn't used in months. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Maya?" "Derek," she said. "You saw it, right?" "Yeah," came the reply. "Captain Derek Lang, former fleet instructor, now flying cargo runs to the belt. They think we're still the scared monkeys who barely made it off our own planet." "We're not," Maya said. "No," Derek agreed. "We're not." Back on Luna, Paul finally spoke. "What do we do?" Lisa turned to him. "We talk, we stall. We show them we're not a threat. And if they don't care, then we prepare." Paul nodded. He walked to the viewport and placed a hand against the cool glass. Down there, billions of people lived their lives, working, loving, arguing, dreaming. They didn't know about the message yet, but they would soon. That evening, President Ruiz addressed the world. Not from a grand hall, but from a simple desk in his office. No flags, no fanfare. Just him, a camera, and the truth. "Today, the Galactic Concord gave Earth an ultimatum," he began. His voice was calm but firm. They demand we give up our ships, our freedom to explore, and our right to decide our own future. They say we've broken their rules, but we never agreed to those rules. We were never invited to their table. Now they knock on our door with weapons drawn. He paused, eyes steady into the lens. We will not disarm. We will not surrender. And we will not be treated like children who must be scolded for stepping outside. Earth has known war. We have known loss. But we have also known courage. And if they force our hand, they will learn what humanity is truly made of. The speech lasted less than 3 minutes, but by the time it ended, every shipyard in the system had reopened. Every defense grid went to alert status. And in homes from Nairobi to New Delhi, people looked up at the night sky, not with fear but with quiet resolve. The Concorde had expected obedience. They had studied human history, yes, but only the parts that showed division, greed, and collapse. They had missed the other side, the stubborn hope, the relentless will to survive, the way ordinary people become extraordinary when pushed too far. 7 days passed. Earth did not comply. Instead, hidden platforms powered up in the dark between the moons of Jupiter. AI cores hummed to life in orbital stations long thought abandoned. And on the surface of Mars, Nate Brooks and a team of volunteers began welding armor plates onto old freighter hulls. The Concorde sent no follow-up message. They didn't need to. Their fleet was already moving, and Earth, for the first time in its history, was ready. Part 2. The Concorde fleet entered the Sol system without warning. No hails, no signals, just a wall of silver ships sliding past the orbit of Neptune like ghosts in the dark. They moved in perfect formation, silent and sure, as if Earth had already surrendered. Admiral Cale Vore stood on the command deck of the flagship Sovereign Will, his long fingers resting on the edge of the tactical display. He was a tall being from the Lithari Dominion, with smooth gray skin and eyes that saw in ultraviolet. To him, this mission was routine. Earth was a young species, loud and messy, but ultimately harmless. One show of force and they would kneel. He was wrong. Deep in the asteroid belt, a human sensor buoy, no bigger than a trash can, detected the fleet's gravity wake. It sent a single pulse. That pulse triggered a chain reaction across the system. Hidden relays lit up. Defense protocols activated. And on Luna Base Gamma, alarms began to blare. Paul Hayes was in the mess hall when it happened. He dropped his coffee and ran. By the time he reached the command center, Lisa Monroe was already coordinating with Geneva. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she pulled up the fleet's trajectory. They're heading straight for Earth, she said. No attempt to communicate. They're treating us like a hostile target. Paul stared at the screen. 12 capital ships, dozens of escorts, enough firepower to glass a continent. And Earth's official fleet? Barely a dozen outdated cruisers and a handful of patrol cutters. On paper it was no contest, but Earth wasn't fighting on paper. Activate Grid Sigma, Paul said. Lisa didn't hesitate. She entered the command code. Across the inner system, dormant platforms hidden in the shadows of moons and dead comets powered on. These weren't warships. They were kinetic launchers, simple, brutal, and fast. Each one held hundreds of tungsten rods, cold and dense, waiting to fall. The Concorde fleet crossed the orbit of Mars. Still no message. Still no warning. On Mars Colony Theta, Nate Brooks watched the sky through a reinforced dome. He'd been working on a freighter hull when the alert came. Now he stood with Maya Ruiz beside him, both in flight suits, both silent. They really came, Maya said. Yeah, Nate replied. Now let's show them why that was a mistake. Back on Earth, President Ruiz stood in the war room, arms behind his back. General Ford pointed to a hologram showing the Concorde's path. They'll reach lunar orbit in 6 hours. We can't stop them with ships. We don't need to, Ruiz said. We just need to make them regret coming. At 0432, the first rod struck. It came from a platform near Ganymede, launched silently into a decaying orbit. It hit the rear escort Dawn's Resolve at 17 kilometers per second. There was no explosion, just a flash of vaporized metal and a cloud of debris. The ship folded in half like paper. Admiral Vore barely had time to react before the second strike hit. Then the third. The Concorde ship scrambled, shields flaring, engines burning hard to change course. But the rods came from every direction. Some from the asteroid belt, some from lunar craters, even a few launched from old satellites orbiting Venus. The human defense grid wasn't fancy. It didn't use plasma beams or warp disruptors. It used physics. And physics didn't care how advanced you were. Within 20 minutes, 3 conquered capital ships were crippled. 2 more had lost engines. The rest broke formation, scattering like startled birds. On the Sovereign Will, alarms screamed. Ford gripped the railing, his calm shattered. Who designed this? He demanded. This is not in their records. Their technology is primitive. It's not the tech, his tactical officer whispered. It's the thinking. They turned the whole system into a weapon. Back on Luna, Paul exhaled for the first time in an hour. They're retreating. Lisa nodded, eyes wide. We just hit them harder than anyone has in a century. But the victory was fragile. The Concorde hadn't been destroyed, only surprised. And surprised enemies were dangerous. On Mars, Maya suited up. I'm going out, she told Nate. With what? A wrench? She grinned. With whatever I can fly. They left debris. We can scavenge. And if they come back, we'll be ready. Nate didn't argue. He handed her a toolkit and a patched-up pressure helmet. Don't get shot. I'll try. In Geneva, President Ruiz addressed the Concorde on an open channel. His tone was calm but firm. You entered our system without warning. You treated us as enemies before giving us a chance to speak. We defended ourselves. Leave now and we can still talk. Stay. And the next strike won't be so gentle. The Concorde didn't reply. But their fleet limped past Saturn, shields flickering, hulls scarred. Across Earth, people watched the news in stunned silence. For the first time, they saw proof that humanity wasn't weak. That their home wasn't just a blue dot in the void, but a fortress built by stubborn hands and sharper minds. In a small workshop on Ceres, a retired engineer named Frank Cole rewired a mining drone to carry a signal jammer. In Rio, teenagers coded decoy transponders to mimic warship signatures. In Tokyo, a factory that once made solar panels now stamped out heat-resistant plating for drone hulls. The Concorde had expected fear. Instead, they found preparation, and worse, they found unity. No one waited for orders. No one asked if it was safe. They just acted. Because Earth wasn't just a government or a military. It was billions of people who had survived ice ages, plagues, and their own worst instincts. They knew how to rebuild. And now they knew how to fight. Admiral Vore sent a private report to the Concord High Council. Humanity is not primitive, he wrote. They are unpredictable. They weaponize simplicity. They turn weakness into traps. Recommend full strategic reassessment before further engagement. But the Council didn't listen. Pride ran deep in the Concorde. To be turned back by a single unaligned world? Unthinkable. Plans for a larger invasion began that night. Meanwhile, on a quiet hill outside Denver, a boy named Eli pointed his homemade telescope at the stars. His father stood beside him, hands in his pockets. Are they coming back? Eli asked. Probably, his father said. Will we win? His father looked at the lights of the city below, bright, alive, humming with purpose. We don't have to win, he said. We just have to make it too costly for them to keep trying. Eli nodded. He didn't understand all of it. But he understood this. Earth was worth defending. And somewhere in the dark between the planets, the first human drone swarm powered up, silent, small, and hungry for a fight. Part 3. The Concorde didn't return right away. They needed time. Time to gather more ships. Time to plan. Time to convince themselves that Earth was still just a minor problem, not a threat. But while they waited, Earth did not. Across the Sol system, people moved like a single organism. Factories that once made cars, clothes, or food now hummed with the sound of armor plating and circuit boards. Schools turned classrooms into coding labs. Retired engineers came back to work. Farmers used their drone networks to map asteroid fields for hidden weapon sites. No one was told to do this. They just did it. In Chicago, Maya Ruiz stood in a hangar filled with old cargo haulers. Most were rusted, patched together with spare parts and hope. She wiped grease from her hands and looked at the ship in front of her, a battered freighter named Steady Hand. It had carried grain to Mars colonies for 10 years. Now it would carry missiles. Beside her, Nate Brooks adjusted a power coupler. This thing won't survive a real fight, he said. Then we'll make sure it doesn't have to, Maya replied. We're not trying to win in open space. We're trying to make them think twice before they get close. That was the new rule. Don't fight fair. Fight smart. On Luna Base Gamma, Paul Hayes reviewed schematics with Lisa Monroe. They weren't building big ships. They were building traps, fake signals that looked like fleets, drones that mimicked the heat of warships, mines hidden in comet tails. Earth couldn't match the Concord in firepower, but it could drown them in confusion. Carl Dawson in Geneva says every city now has a defense cell, Lisa said, scrolling through reports. Even kids are helping. They're using school drones to test jamming fields. Paul smiled faintly. They think we're chaotic, unorganized. Good. Let them believe it. In Geneva, Carl Dawson sat in a basement office that used to store old water filters. Now it was the nerve center for Earth's civilian defense network. Maps covered the walls, some of space, some of cities. Radios crackled with voices from every continent. A woman in Nairobi reported a new signal relay was live. A teenager in Oslo had built a sensor array from old phone parts. In Manila, a group of fishermen repurposed sonar gear to track orbital debris. Carl wasn't a soldier. He'd been a city planner before the crisis. But he understood systems, how things connected, how people moved, how to turn everyday life into a shield. And Earth, for all its flaws, was full of people who knew how to fix things, build things, and protect their own. Meanwhile, in a quiet university lab in Boston, linguist Olivia Grant stared at lines of alien text on her screen. She'd been decoding Concord transmissions since the first message arrived. Most were encrypted, but not all. Some were internal comms, officers talking to each other during the retreat. She leaned closer. One message stood out. It was from a junior officer on a Cathari vessel. The humans don't follow logic. They attack from blind spots. Their tactics feel personal. Olivia saved the file and sent it to Geneva. If the Concorde was starting to doubt itself, that was as powerful as any weapon. Back on Mars, Nate and Maya finished their work on Steady Hand. They'd stripped out the cargo holds and installed racks for micro-missiles. The ship's AI was old, but they'd patched it with code written by a 16-year-old in Reykjavik. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. We're not alone in this, Maya said as she ran a final systems check. Every shipyard, every garage, every basement lab, they're all part of the same fight. Nate nodded. They thought we'd break under pressure. Instead, we got sharper. On Earth, life went on, but changed. People still went to work, cooked meals, played with their kids. But now, a mother might teach her child how to send an encrypted message. A shopkeeper might hide spare parts for drone repair under the counter. A teacher might use math class to calculate orbital intercept paths. The Concorde had studied human history, but only the parts that showed division, wars between nations, arguments over borders, centuries of conflict. They missed the other truth. When pushed, humans came together. Not perfectly, not always peacefully, but they came. President Ruiz didn't give grand speeches anymore. He visited factories, sat in on strategy calls with teenagers who'd never worn a uniform, listened more than he spoke. He knew the real strength wasn't in his office. It was in the hands of people who refused to quit. One evening, he stood on a balcony in Geneva, looking up at the stars. General Ford joined him. They're gathering a bigger fleet, she said. Estimates say 3 times what they sent last time. Ruiz didn't flinch. Let them come. Every ship they lose makes the others think. Every mistake they make gives us time, and time is what we need. In the belt, miners welded hull plates onto old ore carriers. In orbit, retired pilots trained kids to fly drones using simulators built from game consoles. On the moon, scientists turned ice drills into tunnel borers for hidden launch bays. The Concorde expected a military. They found a civilization, and civilizations don't surrender easily. Olivia Grant made another discovery. She found a pattern in Concorde supply logs. Certain species, like the Varel and the Mokta, were delaying shipments. Not refusing, just slowing down. When she dug deeper, she found messages between them. Why die for a council that fears a single world? Earth fights for its home. Do we even remember ours? The cracks were small, but they were there. Carl Dawson used that intel to send fake distress calls in Varel dialects near their trade routes, just enough to make them question orders. Just enough to sow doubt. War wasn't just about weapons. It was about will. And Earth's will was growing stronger every day. Maya took Steady Hand out for a test run. She flew low over Mars's red plains, then shot upward into the black. The ship groaned but held. She smiled. It wasn't a warship. It was something better, a symbol. Proof that ordinary people could build something extraordinary when their home was on the line. Back on Earth, a little girl in Mumbai built a model of a kinetic launcher out of cardboard and string. Her teacher put it on the classroom wall. No one knew it would inspire a real design used 2 weeks later near Titan. The Concord still thought they were fighting a government. They didn't realize they were fighting everyone, and that was their biggest mistake. 4. The Concord returned with fire in their hearts and steel in their fleets. This time there were no warnings. No slow approach. They came fast and hard, splitting into 3 arms. One aimed at Earth, one at Luna, and one at Mars. Operation Silent Dawn had begun. Admiral Vor led the main force himself. He had studied the reports. He knew Earth's tricks now. He ordered his ships to ignore decoys, sweep for hidden platforms, and burn every suspicious object in their path. He believed this time would be different. This time humanity would break, but Earth was ready. As the Concorde fleet crossed the orbit of Jupiter, strange things started happening. Their long-range sensors flickered. Navigation systems glitched. A supply tender vanished near a quiet asteroid, later found drifting. Its crew unharmed, but its data cores wiped clean by a virus hidden in a fake distress signal. On Mars Colony Theta, Nate Brooks watched the incoming fleet on a cracked monitor. "They're spreading out," he said, "trying to hit us all at once." Maya Ruiz stood beside him, flight suit zipped, helmet under her arm. "Good. That means they're weaker in each place." She turned and walked toward the hangar. Behind her, dozens of pilots, some military, most not, were climbing into ships that looked more like scrap than fighters. But everyone carried custom weapons, jury-rigged shields, and the same stubborn hope. At Neptune's ring, a dense band of ice and rock orbiting the gas giant, Captain Derek Lang waited in the cockpit of a refitted ice hauler named Last Chance. Around him, 30 other civilian ships floated in silence. No lights, no signals, just cold metal and colder resolve. Derek had trained these crews himself. Most had never fired a weapon in space, but they knew their ships better than anyone. They knew how to hide in shadow, how to use gravity slings, how to turn a mining laser into a blinding flash. When the Concorde Vanguard entered the ring, Derek gave the order. Now dozens of engines flared to life, not to attack but to scatter. They flew in chaotic patterns, kicking up ice dust, triggering old mining charges buried decades ago. The conquered ships fired blindly, wasting energy on ghosts. Then came the real strike. Hidden in the debris, human drones, small, silent, and packed with shaped charges, slipped past shields and latched onto hulls. One by one they detonated. Not enough to destroy, but enough to cripple engines, fry comms, blind sensors. The conquered flagship's command deck shook as alarms blared. "We're losing contact with the rear wing," an officer shouted. Vor's face darkened. "Where are they coming from?" "Everywhere," came the reply. Back on Earth, Carl Dawson's team had done their work well. For weeks, they'd fed false data into captured Concorde supply networks. Now the invasion fleet was running low on coolant, spare parts, even food. Some ships had taken on contaminated rations, not knowing the crates had been swapped during a fake trade deal near the belt. Meanwhile, Olivia Grant sat in her Boston lab, listening to live Concorde comms. She heard panic growing, officers arguing, orders being ignored. One ship even turned back, claiming system failure, but Olivia knew better. The Mokta crew had chosen to quit. On Luna, Paul Hayes watched as the orbital defense grid launched its second wave. This time the rods weren't just tungsten. Some carried EMP pulses. Others released clouds of reflective chaff that blinded targeting systems. The conquered ships, so proud and precise, began to collide with each other in the confusion. But the real battle was at Mars. Maya led a group of 5 freighters toward the conquered assault group heading for Colony Theta. They didn't have the firepower to win a straight fight, so they didn't try. Instead, they flew low over the planet's surface, using canyons and dust storms as cover. They dropped sensor buoys that mimicked the signature of a hidden base. The Conquered took the bait. As their ships dove to investigate, Nate triggered the canyon mines, old seismic charges left over from terraforming projects. The ground erupted. Rock and plasma swallowed 2 Conquered destroyers whole. Maya didn't stop. She looped around and fired her ship's only real weapon, a railgun cobbled together from a factory press and a power core stolen from a lunar tram. It punched through the bridge of a scout vessel. The ship spun away, dead. Back on Earth, President Ruiz stood in the war room watching reports pour in. Losses were heavy. A lunar station was gone. 3 civilian ships had been destroyed near Titan. But the Concorde was bleeding too, and worse, they were confused. General Ford pointed to a screen. Their center wing is falling back. They're regrouping near Saturn. Ruiz nodded. Then we hit them while they're weak. He gave the order. Every remaining drone, every hidden platform, every volunteer pilot. Move. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a storm. From the rings of Saturn to the dark side of Mercury, human forces struck in waves. Not with grand fleets, but with bites. A drone here, a mine there, a hacked signal that made a ship fire on its own ally. The Concorde, used to clean, orderly warfare, had no answer for this kind of chaos. By the time the sun rose over Geneva, it was over. The Concorde fleet was broken. 40% of its ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest fled, not in formation, but in panic. Admiral Vor's flagship limped past Pluto, shields down, comms silent. On Mars, Maya landed, steady hand with smoke trailing from one engine. She climbed out, exhausted but smiling. Nate ran to meet her. "We did it," he said. "No," she replied, looking up at the stars. "We just made them think twice." In Geneva, Carl Dawson received a message from a virile traitor. It was simple. "Your fight is seen. Not all of us stand with the Concorde." Olivia read it and whispered, "We're not alone anymore." Earth hadn't won with weapons alone. It had won with cleverness, with sacrifice, with the kind of messy, stubborn courage that no council of stars could ever understand. And as the first rescue ships launched to recover the lost and wounded, people across the system knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. For fear, the message came not with threats, but with silence. A single Concorde vessel, small, unarmed, painted white, drifted into the edge of the Sol system and sent a simple request. "We ask for ceasefire talks. No demands. No conditions. Just a plea." On Luna Base Gamma, Paul Hayes read the transmission twice before showing it to Lisa Monroe. She exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "They're scared," she said. "Good," Paul replied. "Maybe now they'll listen." Back on Earth, President Ruiz didn't celebrate. He knew peace was harder than war. War had clear enemies. Peace had doubts, wounds, and questions that didn't have easy answers. But he also knew this was the moment humanity had to get right. He agreed to the talks, but on Earth's terms. The meeting would happen in orbit, aboard a neutral station once used for asteroid research. No weapons, no soldiers, just voices. The day of the meeting, Maya Ruiz piloted a shuttle carrying Earth's delegation. She wasn't part of the official team, but they needed someone who knew space better than politics. She stayed in the cockpit, watching through the viewport as the white Concorde ship docked. Inside the station, Ruiz sat at a plain metal table. Across from him sat Elder Tara Voss, a senior member of the Concorde Council. She was old, her skin lined with centuries, her eyes tired. She didn't look like a conqueror. She looked like someone who had finally seen too much. "You surprised us," she said quietly. "We didn't want to fight," Ruiz replied. "But we won't be erased," Tara nodded. "We studied your history. We saw your wars, your divisions. We thought you were weak because you argued so much." "You saw the noise," Ruiz said. "But you missed the reason. We argue because we care. We build, even when we break. We don't follow one voice, we find our own way together." She was silent for a long time. Then she leaned forward. "What do you want now?" "Not revenge," Ruiz said. "Not dominance. Just respect. And a seat at the table, not as subjects but as equals." Tara looked down at her hands. "The Concorde is not what it once was. Many members are afraid. Not of your weapons, but of your spirit. You fight not to rule, but to live. That confuses us." "Then let us teach you," Ruiz said. The talks lasted 3 days. Earth didn't ask for reparations, didn't demand surrender. Instead, they offered something unexpected: partnership, shared science, open trade routes, joint exploration beyond the known galaxy, and a new treaty, one written with human input, based on mutual choice, not command. Slowly, carefully, the Concorde agreed. When the white ship left Sol space, it carried more than just Elder Tara. It carried data drives filled with human medical research, Clean energy designs and even music, songs from every corner of Earth. Gifts, not weapons. Back home, people didn't throw parades. They went back to work. Factories shifted from armor to solar panels. Schools returned to regular lessons, though space defense remained part of the curriculum. Kids still built drones, but now some were for farming, not fighting. On Mars, Nate Brooks helped convert the old weapon bays into greenhouse modules. "Guess we're growing tomatoes instead of missiles," he joked. Maya stood beside him, looking out at the red horizon. "For now," she said, "but if they ever come back, we'll be ready." She didn't say it with anger, just calm certainty. In Geneva, Carl Dawson closed his command center for the last time. The radios fell silent. The maps came down from the walls. But he kept one thing: a small notebook filled with names of volunteers from every continent. He tucked it into his coat and walked outside. The sun was warm. The city buzzed with normal life: buses, laughter, street vendors. It felt fragile, but also strong. Olivia Grant received a message from a Varel scholar. It was a thank you note for the medical data Earth had shared. Attached was a star chart of a region no human had seen, with a single word: explore. She smiled and forwarded it to the new Office of Interstellar Relations, a department created just weeks before. President Ruiz gave one final speech. Not from a war room, but from a park in Buenos Aires where he'd grown up. He stood under a tree, no podium, no lights. "We didn't win because we were the strongest," he said. "We won because we refused to disappear. And now we move forward, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as neighbors among the stars." The galaxy watched. Some still feared Earth, others admired it. Most simply respected it, and that was enough. Months later, Maya flew a new ship, this one built for science, not war, past the rings of Saturn. It was sleek, solar-powered, and carried a crew of 6. 2 pilots, 2 biologists, an engineer, and a teacher. Their mission: to study a newly discovered ice moon near Alpha Centauri. As she guided the ship into deep space, she thought about how far they'd come, not just in distance, but in trust, in courage, in the quiet belief that home was worth protecting, but the universe was worth sharing. Behind her, Earth shone in the distance, small blue, and alive. They had shocked the Galactic Council not with cruelty, but with resolve. Not with hate, but with the simple, brutal truth that humans would not be erased. And as the stars stretched ahead, endless and bright, Maya knew one thing for sure: humanity's story was just beginning.